you say, every era kind of like has its champion or its a leading person kind of thing, and they're the three that automatically come to mind. I think he'll be playing it for as long as he can.
Hi there, welcome back to the MODUS Super Series darts channel on Pluto TV, the 24-hour home of darts and arrows content. And we are here to talk about the story of one of the legends of the game, John Lowe, Old Stoneface, three-time champion of the world. And alongside me to talk you through that tale, his 10-time champion of the world, Trina Gulliver. Trina, welcome. A good chance to look back and reminisce on one of the legendary careers. We'll go through it in sort of chronological order, but I'm just going to start by asking you, what are the first sort of things you think of when you hear the name John Lowe?
Stoneface is obviously his nickname. A gentleman. He's known as being a gentleman, and and a solid throw. I think that's the things that stick out. Yeah,
he really did have that sort of measured, methodical throw, didn't he, that a lot of people would want to emulate back in the day. And look, he was born in 1945, worked as a carpenter and joiner, an industry that you know well, but started to perform in the darts world in the 1970s when the News of the World was a big tournament, the World Masters was around, and made it to the final of the first ever World Championship. So that is something that I don't think any or many other sports can say, that the people who were played in the first World Championship final are still alive. It just kind of shows you that darts is pretty young still, isn't it, as a sport?
Yes, and his longevity in the sport as well. I mean, if he's 80 years old now, and he's still doing exhibitions and stuff. So he still loves the darts, and he's had a fantastic career.
Yeah, won the world title in 3 different decades as well. We'll talk about each of them. But that first one, losing out to Leighton Rees in the final. One of the forefathers, really, of darts, isn't he, John? Because you don't really get Phil Taylor and Michael van Gerwen and Raymond van Barneveld if you don't have these players of that generation before.
Absolutely. It's they started the ball rolling, and the game became massive in the 80s. And, John, Eric, Jockey were at the forefront of all of that. So, like I say, every era kind of like has its champion or its a leading person kind of thing. And like you say, in the eras of Phil Taylor and Michael van Gerwen, they've had their times as well. And at the moment, everybody's progressing. Like with the ladies, at this point in time, it's Bo. In the men's, then you've got to say it's Luke Littler, really. So, every generation has their prominent player then, if you like.
I mentioned he got to the final of the first World Championship. He won the next one. It was him and Leighton Rees again. He won it a year later in 79. Now, you won the first ever Women's World Championship. What would that feeling have been like? Because I'm sure it would have been similar for him, albeit a couple of decades earlier.
Yeah, it's very special, isn't it? And it's one you're going to always remember because of it being that first one, like you say. So, yeah, I'm sure that the feelings are very similar in how that was.
Can I ask you, what was the prize money that you won for your first Women's World Championship?
I can't remember. I think it was 4,000.
Right, I'm going to ask you another question. What's the biggest amount of prize money you've won for a darts tournament?
25, and that was I think it was 25, and that was in Saskatoon in Canada, Saskatoon Open, and that was a great tournament, and hasn't run for a few years now, quite some time, but it was a fantastic tournament. That was one of the top competitions for the men's as well. The
reason I ask you that question is because in 1984, John Lowe earned £102,000 for winning one leg when he hit that first ever televised 9-dart finish.
Yeah, that makes me feel great.
But that was remarkable. It's obviously had never been done live on TV before. So for that to happen, I mean, what an honour to have to your name.
Yes, absolutely, and well deserved, and it gave a lot of publicity to the game, and the 9-darter became sort of like a thing, whereas it was going to be rewarded all the time, whether it be with money or there's been cars given away and things like that. So yeah, it was a very special moment.
Yeah, and he'd have earned a bit of interest on that, wouldn't he, in the
He would
period
have.
since then. Look, 1987, he goes on to win the second World Championship. Again, something you can relate to, because Eric Bristow himself said, I don't really believe this. He said you can fluke one World Championship, but you can't fluke two. So I kind of get where he's coming from, but I don't think anybody really flukes winning a World Championship. But once you've won two, you're a multiple World Champion. You're up there, aren't you, with the greats of the game?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to win one, let alone two, kind of thing. And to carry it on. I mean, I managed to fluke 7 on the trot, so there you go. It's special, and once you've got that one under your belt, you want to retain, and you go all out to do so.
I mentioned Eric there for a reason as well, because it was Eric that he beat in the final of that one. Now, something that we certainly had in that era was characters, wasn't it? And John was an interesting one, because he was kind of the straight guy, wasn't he, amongst all of this sort of Bobby George and Eric Bristow bravado. And often people who were around watching at the time tell me that they would you'd either be a John Lowe fan or you'd be an Eric Bristow fan. Yeah,
I think that's very much the thing. I think it's the flamboyancy of Eric and the, as I say, the calmness of John. Like you say, they were totally different, and it worked well together. So yes, I can understand why people would say you're either an Eric Bristow fan, you enjoy the flamboyancy of it all, or you're a John Lowe fan that's like a bit of the steady Eddie kind of situation.
And there were kind of rumours around the time, Bobby George himself saying that John Lowe wasn't really into that side of the game. He didn't like the fact that Bobby used to walk out with the glittering cape and the candelabra and all that kind of thing. He just wanted to play good darts, and he did play pretty good darts.
He did, and Bobby's right. He didn't like it much, and but like you say again, he was the straight guy kind of thing, and the flamboyancy wasn't his style. Does
every kind of sport, do characters need that kind of rival that are totally opposite to them?
I think so. It makes it entertaining for the audience, doesn't it? And it'd be all very boring if we were all the same. So I think to have a variety of different personalities, I think that's important for any game.
Picked up a lot of other titles, World Masters a couple of times, News of the World he won in 81, British Open match play, represented England over 100 times. Now, you know the pride of playing for your country. What would that have meant to him? Because back then, it was a huge deal, wasn't it? It was,
and that'd have been at the forefront of his career. I'm sure he'll mark that down as one of his favourite moments, and playing for your country is very special, and like you say, back then it was a major tournament.
And then we get to 1993, and he wins the World Championship for a third time, beating Alan Warriner in the final. We mentioned winning it twice is some feat. Winning it 3 times is even more, but to win it in 3 different decades, you had said the word earlier, longevity, that just shows how good he was for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, 3 decades, that's something special, to have that consistency over that longer period is phenomenal.
Do you regard him, when you think of that era, as kind of one of the big 3? If I say John Lowe, Eric Bristow, Jockey Wilson.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they're the 3 that automatically come to mind, I think, through when any dart player or even Joe Bloggs. The general audience, I think, of that generation, they are the 3 that's going to come to mind first. Yeah, we've had Phil Taylor in the studio, actually, and he said that John Lowe was the player that he watched when he was young. Did you see a bit of that in the way Phil played the game? Yeah, a little bit. He's a bit straight-laced kind of thing, if you like, yeah.
And the way actually threw the darts as well.
Yeah, there's a bit of, very similar, as in a throw, really, yes.
Yeah, certainly they treat the sport as about accuracy, about precision, not about speed, which is kind of the fashionable thing today.
Well, it is, isn't it? Everything seems to be a rhythm game these days, and it's not. There's nothing to say that that's right or wrong, but the averages of this day and age, it's increasing, and whether that's to do with the style of throw that's been adopted now, I don't know, but technology's come on a lot as well, with the darts, with the setup of the dart as well. So there's a lot of factors that make the increase in averages.
Around that time as well, I mentioned Phil Taylor because around 93, Taylor had emerged. I know he was one of the top players himself. John Lowe won that World Championship, but was maybe just starting to slide down the pecking order a little bit because of that, but was part of that breakaway group that formed the then WDC, now PDC. Every one of those is such an important figure in the game.
Yeah, they were brave enough to take that leap, and they had some sticky years. And it wasn't all sweet sailing, and it was tough, but it worked out in the long run. And there was it was a tricky time for darts, and they had the courage to go their separate ways because they thought that it would be better, and in the long run it proved them right.
I'm not saying this will happen in women's darts by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not trying to cause any controversy here, but was the game of darts at that time in a similar place to where the women's game maybe was 5 or 6 years ago before the PDC started doing the women's series and other things, where maybe the need for that little bit more exposure was not being fulfilled? And is that why the players felt they had to go and kind of court it themselves?
I think, the fact that the PDC have come along and given us the women's series has been a major impact on the ladies' game, and so yes, to a certain degree, we were limited in where we could go. We only had one direction really, which was the BDO and the WDF events. So we didn't have any other options. But now that we've given that, there's no Tomlin order there anymore, so it doesn't affect the ladies like it did the men back then, and so. We're just enjoying all these opportunities that we're getting, and making the most of the coverage and the media attention that we're getting.
So I suppose in many ways, the women and the men dart players have the likes of John and the other 15 players that did that they owe him a real legacy of gratitude.
Absolutely,
there would
yes.
be no PDC, would there? Absolutely.
No, they, like I said, they were brave enough to take that step and to see the future in darts, and it's benefited us all.
John himself never really thrived in the PDC. Maybe it came a little bit too late for him. He did have some decent results, but would never pick up a PDC major title. Do you think that will be maybe the one disappointment in his career?
Maybe. I think. John's achieved so much in the game, and I think. Sometimes you've got to be happy with your lot, kind of thing, and but perhaps that's one that's got away from him, and perhaps he does feel that he's missed out a little bit. But when you look back on his career, he's done so well, and he should be happy with that, really.
He carried on competing, but that kind of gradually retired in the early 2000s. But fast forward 20 years, he's on stage playing at the World Seniors Championship.
I know there's no end to his talents, is there? His longevity, and he's still got it. He's still doing exhibitions and stuff like that. So I think John just loves the game, doesn't he? And I think he'll be playing it for as long as he can.
And it was a big deal, wasn't it, when he played at the World Seniors? So that just shows how he's still thought of in this game. People who weren't around when he was playing at the top of his game still know who he is, still went to watch him, and he's an ambassador now for the seniors as well. Yeah,
well, that's the legacy that he's brought along with himself, and that just shows his achievements in the game, and how well he's thought of. Yeah,
widely respected in the sport. He brought out an autobiography called Old Stone Face, as you mentioned earlier on, has worked in various different guises in the sport as well, and as you say, still active on the exhibition circuit, which at the age of 80 is remarkable. And I suppose only a few players could really do that if they've got that huge name that they can carry.
Yeah, I think another one that's still doing the exhibition circuit is Bob Anderson. So and Bobby obviously as well, Bobby George. But I don't think Bobby plays as much now. He's more on the chatting side of things. So. But yeah, they're still there, and they're still doing what they can, and the legacies of the game.
He's been inducted into various sort of halls of fame and stuff like that. I think we're in agreement that he is one of the sort of pioneers of this sport. But I'm going to ask you the question that I ask about most players when we have these chats about the story of their life and career, and that is, if you were to do a top 10 list, where would he rank, John Lowe?
Well, I don't know. Again, it's that generation thing, isn't it? So if you're talking about his generation, I'd probably put him second to Eric. But that's nothing personal, John. But it's but if you're looking over the generations, then it's hard to do it like that, because each generation is different, and each generation has their own class then of dart.
Yeah, often judged by world titles, so I think second in that kind of generation's fair, because Eric won 5, of course, didn't he? But just in terms of legacy, we've touched on a lot of it. What is the ultimate thing that John Lowe has really left behind in darts? What would darts have been without him, I suppose, is the question.
Well, I think he's best known in his darts for his 9-darter. I think that's a fair comment to say, and that's I think he'll always be remembered for that, and for his competitiveness and the rivalry that him and Eric had in particular, and the way that they played off it against each other.
Trina, thank you very much. That is the story of John Lowe, certainly worthy of an episode, and you can check out the entire series here on the MODUS Super Series Darts channel on Pluto TV.